Have you ever received a message so brief, yet so powerful, that it quietly rearranged the furniture of your heart? My name is Helen Bradford, and if you met me on an ordinary morning, you might never guess the storms I've weathered. 61 years old, retired schoolteacher, widow lover, of quiet Seattle rain and old jazz records. For decades, I built my life around the laughter and needs of my 2 daughters. I didn't expect parades or gratitude, just a seat at their table, a phone call on my birthday, a hug in the kitchen after a long week. It was a Tuesday, the kind of gray Pacific Northwest morning where the sky seems to weigh just a little heavier. I poured my coffee, watched a crow land on the porch railing, and checked my email, with the soft hope that maybe today there'd be a quick hello from Laura, my oldest. When I saw her name in my inbox, my heart did that quiet leap, the one only mothers know. No subject line, just Laura Bradford. I smiled, imagining she might be sending a photo of her wedding dress or a story about the funny, clumsy puppy she and her fiancé had just adopted. I clicked the message, expecting warmth. What I found was a chill I hadn't felt since the day I lost my husband. Mom. That was all it said at the top. Not mama, not hi mom, but just mom. The words that followed were simple, almost clinical. After talking things over with Andrew's family, she wrote, they had decided it was best for me not to attend the wedding in person. We want to keep things small and intimate. Andrew's mother is particular about the guest list. She ended with, but you can watch the ceremony online. It's just like being there. Hope you understand. For a long moment, the world seemed to freeze. I could hear the slow drip of the kitchen faucet, the distant hum of a neighbor's lawnmower. My coffee grew cold in my hands, but I barely noticed. It wasn't anger that filled me, not at first. It was a slow, bewildered ache, the kind that creeps in when you realize the life you built so carefully has tilted beneath your feet. I read the email again and again, searching for some warmth in the spaces between the words, some secret code that might unlock a different reality. In those minutes, I found myself tumbling back through time. I saw Laura as a child clutching my hand on her first day of school. I remembered the birthday cakes I baked, the nights I sat awake worrying over fevers and heartbreaks, the tiny notes she once left on my pillow. It's funny how in the sharpest moments of pain, the mind grabs onto old comforts, trying to stitch together what suddenly feels unraveled. I realized that somewhere along the way, my place in her life had become negotiable, a convenience, not a certainty. I answered with just 4 words. Of course, all the best. There was no drama, no plea, just a quiet withdrawal. Sometimes silence says more than any argument. I closed my laptop and looked out the window as rain began to bead along the glass. That was the moment something inside me shifted gently but irrevocably. I understood in the stillness that I had reached the edge of a chapter 1 I hadn't realized I was ready to leave behind. The drive to the grocery store that morning felt different. The world went on, cars zipped by. A child laughed as his mother hurried him under an umbrella, but I carried a new, invisible weight. I thought about the years I spent giving the ways I'd bent and reshaped my life for the people I loved. I had always told myself there would be time later to find myself again. Yet somehow, that time never seemed to arrive. Until perhaps now. And so that Tuesday became more than the day I was uninvited to my own daughter's wedding. It became the day I finally paused, took stock, and asked, when is it my turn to be seen to belong, not as a role, but as a person? Little did I know that simple, quiet question would change everything about the story I thought I was living. If you had peeked behind the front door of our old blue house in Seattle, you would have seen a world held together by gentle, ordinary sacrifices. After my husband passed away, there were no windfalls, just choices made quietly in grocery store aisles and at kitchen tables late at night. I picked up extra tutoring jobs, skipped vacations, and made peace with hand-me-down shoes. Every dollar that could have gone toward a dinner out or a new dress ended up funding Laura's college textbooks or Becca's ballet lessons. That's what mothers do, I thought. We save our softest parts for our children, believing it will always be enough. It's funny how easily those sacrifices become invisible even to ourselves. There were times when the girls were small that they'd leave notes under my pillow. "Best mom ever," written in crayon, or wrap their arms around me sticky from popsicles, promising they'd never grow up and leave. Those moments kept me afloat. But as the years rolled by, the gratitude faded into expectation. I didn't mind, not really. My own mother used to say, "If you do your job right, you'll work yourself out of a job." I suppose I took that to heart, forgetting that love without boundaries can sometimes turn invisible. Looking back, I see the pattern so clearly. Each time the girls needed something, a rent deposit, a last-minute ride, a listening ear after a heartbreak, I was there. When Becca moved to Portland and struggled to find her footing, I offered my savings to help her stay afloat. When Laura wanted to switch her major halfway through college, I said yes, quietly rearranging my budget without a word of complaint. I believed, as so many parents do, that love was a bottomless well, and I could always give just a little bit more. But wells can run dry, even the deepest ones. I've learned sometimes too late that giving without limits can lead to an unexpected kind of loneliness. It's not that my daughters were unkind, they were simply accustomed to my presence, my resources, my endless willingness to say yes. I realize now that I rarely asked for anything in return, not even a heartfelt thank you. It wasn't pride that kept me silent. It was the quiet hope that by making things easier for them, I was giving them a better life than I'd ever had. Yet as I sit here reflecting, I wonder if I should have shown them the value of boundaries and the dignity in no. Maybe that's the small lesson in all this, the one I wish I'd understood years ago. Love is abundant, yes, but it isn't endless if it's never returned, never truly seen. Sometimes in trying to spare our children from struggle, we accidentally teach them to take comfort for granted. I think about this now on the other side of that fateful email, and my heart aches not from anger, but from the realization that I too have played a part in writing this chapter. Still, as the rain gently drums against the windows and the city moves quietly outside, I remind myself it's never too late to learn, never too late to grow. The story isn't over, not yet. There are new lessons waiting even for mothers like me. And so, with a heart that is tired but still hopeful, I begin to imagine what it might look like to draw my own boundaries for the first time in a very long time. In the days that followed the email, I found myself thinking about the invisible lines we draw and sometimes erase within our own families. It's one thing to say love is unconditional, but it's another to realize when that love starts to feel more like a transaction. The signs are subtle at first, the gratitude fading from a child's voice, the requests that sound more like expectations, the steady drip of just one more thing, Mom. At first, I chalked it up to busy lives and growing up. But the truth is, those small moments begin to add up until you wonder if you're valued for who you are, or only for what you provide. I remember one spring when Becca's car broke down on the way to a job interview in Portland. She called frantic and embarrassed, apologizing before she even finished explaining the problem. I wired her the money for repairs without a second thought. Later, she texted, "You're a lifesaver." But the next time she needed help, the thank you was gone, replaced by the assumption I would just make it right. Looking back, I see now how quickly comfort can turn into entitlement. We don't mean for it to happen, but kindness, when taken for granted, can quietly lose its shine. This pattern isn't unique to my little family. I've seen it in friends' stories too. A neighbor whose son only visits when he needs something notarized, or a colleague whose grown daughter expects weekly grocery deliveries without so much as a phone call. I once believed this was just the way of things that parents give children receive, and the world keeps spinning. But I'm starting to see that somewhere along the way, the act of giving needs to be met with the act of seeing, of acknowledging, of appreciating the person behind the gift. Here's the lesson I'm slowly learning. Real love is never meant to be a one-way street. There's beauty in generosity, but there's also dignity in asking for respect in return. It's not about keeping score or closing our hearts. It's about recognizing that while we may pour ourselves into those we love, we deserve to be more than an afterthought, more than an open wallet or a late-night phone call when things go wrong. We deserve to be seen for all that we are, our stories, our struggles, our dreams outside of motherhood. Sometimes I wish I could go back and gently tell my younger self, it's okay to say no. It's okay to teach your children gratitude, to show them that love doesn't mean never having needs of your own. Maybe it wouldn't have changed everything. Maybe Laura's email would still have arrived cold and clinical. But perhaps I would have felt a little less lost, a little more anchored in the truth that my worth has never depended on what I could give. Now, as I sit with this realization, there's a quiet clarity settling over me. I'm beginning to see the outlines of a life where my needs matter too, a life where love is freely given, but also freely received. The next step, though uncertain, calls me forward to confront these unspoken rules, to find my voice, and to finally ask for the place I've always deserved at my own family's table. That weekend, Laura called. Her voice, usually light and confident, trembled at the edges. Mom, please try to understand. Andrew's parents have a vision for the ceremony, intimate, traditional. They want to keep the guest list short, mostly family. For a moment, I wanted to laugh at the irony. What else was I, if not family? But I stayed silent, letting her fill the quiet with reasons that felt more like rehearsed lines than real explanations. I listened to her, but deep down, I realized the decision was made long before this conversation. I wondered how many times I'd accepted things just because it was easier to keep the peace. After we hung up, I spent the afternoon walking around Green Lake, letting the chill wind bite at my cheeks. Families passed by, some holding hands, others arguing over spilled popcorn or a lost glove. I watched a mother kneel in the grass, brushing dirt from her toddler's knees, and I felt a pang of envy for the simplicity of those early years. Back then, a scraped knee was the worst wound between parent and child, easily mended with a bandage and a kiss. But as children grow, the hurts become invisible, and the lines between love and duty blur. It's an unspoken rule in so many families: keep quiet, don't make waves, and above all, don't embarrass anyone. I think especially as mothers, we become masters at swallowing our pain and smiling through disappointment. We learn to be grateful for whatever crumbs of affection come our way, even if it means ignoring the ache that grows each time we're sidelined or dismissed. The problem with these silent sacrifices is that they build up quietly, shaping the boundaries of what we accept, until we forget that we ever had the right to question them at all. A friend once told me about her own mother's wedding day, how she was asked to sit at the very back of the church so the real family could have the front rows. It was easier to stay silent, her mother confessed, than to risk being called difficult. For years, she let that moment define her place in the family, never daring to push back, always afraid of losing what little connection she had left. It struck me then how common this story is, especially among women who spend a lifetime earning their seat at a table that keeps moving further away. Here's what I'm beginning to understand: peace that comes at the cost of your own dignity isn't real peace at all. When we allow unspoken rules to go unchallenged, we end up shrinking ourselves to fit into someone else's story, someone else's idea of love. True belonging doesn't ask you to disappear. It welcomes your presence, your needs, and even your voice, especially when it shakes. That evening, as I watched the sun set behind the city skyline, a gentle determination settled inside me. I knew the time had come to stop accepting the scraps of connection, to stop being grateful for crumbs, and instead, to speak up for my own place in the story. The next step would not be easy, but for the first time, I felt ready to try, ready to protect my dignity, even if it meant risking a little discomfort along the way. The hardest part about standing up for yourself isn't always the confrontation. It's the quiet moments after when the world feels uncertain and a little too still. That Monday, I called Laura back. My voice was steady, but my heart thudded in my chest. I told her I loved her, that I wanted her wedding to be beautiful, but I couldn't be comfortable accepting an invitation, only if it was convenient for someone else. I explained that my presence at her celebration shouldn't be something to negotiate or a prize handed out if I behaved the right way. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Afterward, I sat by the window, watching the rain trace silver lines down the glass. I thought of all the times I'd compromised, telling myself it was easier to be flexible than to risk conflict. But something had shifted inside me. I realized I'd spent so many years trying to earn love by being agreeable, by helping, by giving up what mattered to me. It was a pattern I'd learned as a child, watching my own mother fold herself smaller for the comfort of others. Somehow, I'd believed that if I just tried hard enough, I could make everyone happy. I remembered a conversation I once had with a former colleague, Mark, whose father had missed his wedding over a misunderstanding about seating arrangements. He thought he was standing up for himself, Mark said, but all it did was leave everyone with regrets. That story haunted me for years. Was I risking the same outcome? Would I be remembered as stubborn or unkind? The truth I realized is that it's not stubbornness to ask for dignity. It's not unkind to value your own heart, even when others might not understand. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. In American families, we're taught to put others first, to keep the peace, to smooth over rough edges. But there's a difference between being loving and being invisible. Sometimes the only way to teach others how to treat you is to be willing to walk away from what hurts, even when it's the last thing you want. That's not giving up on family. That's hoping deep down that by drawing a line, you're showing them what respect looks like, what love should feel like, and that both are worth fighting for. That night, I sat with a cup of tea, my thoughts spinning. The house was quiet, but for the first time in years, it wasn't the loneliness that weighed on me. It was a gentle sense of relief, a sense that I'd finally named the ache I'd carried for so long. As I watched the lights flicker across the city, I wondered what it would mean to really truly choose dignity over approval, to build a life not around what others expected, but around what I finally believed I deserved. And so, with the smallest but steadiest hope, I resolved to keep moving forward, no matter how unsteady the path might feel. After my conversation with Laura, the world outside seemed unchanged, but inside a quiet storm was gathering. I started noticing how easily guilt and blame can creep into the spaces left by a simple no. My phone chimed with messages, some from Laura, others from Andrew's mother, all circling the same theme: I was making things difficult. We just want everyone to be happy. Helen, one message read as if my absence from the wedding was an act of selfishness instead of self-respect. The temptation to apologize, to backtrack and smooth things over, pressed on me like a familiar heavy coat. There's a strange pressure in families, especially when you're the parent who has always said yes. The moment you draw a line, it's as if the ground beneath everyone shifts. I remembered a friend from my book club, Diane, who once confided how her daughter blamed her for ruining a Thanksgiving after Diane declined to host for the 10th year in a row. The guilt was sharp, even though Diane's health was failing and her request was gentle. In families, it seems the first one to break the pattern is always accused of breaking the peace, even if the pattern was never fair to begin with. It's easy in those moments to question yourself. Was I being unreasonable? Was I letting pride come before love? But as I reflected, I realized the blame wasn't really about me at all. It was about the discomfort that comes when old unspoken rules are challenged. Rules that say parents, especially mothers, are supposed to give endlessly quietly and without complaint. In truth, families are built not only on love, but on habits and expectations, and it takes courage to disrupt them in search of something healthier. I'm learning now that setting boundaries doesn't make you a villain. It means you trust yourself enough to know when enough is enough, even if others can't see it yet. I think of all the times I accepted blame just to avoid conflict, the times I swallowed my hurt to keep others comfortable. Looking back, I see that peace achieved at the cost of your own well-being is never real peace. The real act of love, sometimes the hardest one, is to stop participating in a story that only asks you to give until you're empty. As the days passed, the calls slowed and the messages grew shorter, their urgency replaced by a sullen silence. It hurt, but there was freedom in the quiet too. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a different kind of connection, one built not on expectation or obligation, but on genuine care. With this new clarity, I wondered where my journey might lead if I finally started to build my own sense of worth apart from anyone else's approval. That thought, both daunting and exciting, was my first real step toward healing. Healing, I discovered, doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds in slow, careful steps, sometimes almost invisible. In the quiet, after all the phone calls faded, I found myself staring out my kitchen window each morning, wondering what came next. The urge to fill the silence with busyness was strong, but I resisted. Instead, I took small walks through my neighborhood, letting the rhythm of my steps soothe the ache in my chest. I noticed daffodils pushing through the soil neighbors, waving from their porches, the way sunlight lingered just a little longer in the evenings. Life, I realized, kept moving forward, whether I was ready or not. One day I signed up for a pottery class at the community center, a whim that felt both brave and foolish. I worried I'd stand out awkward and alone, but the instructor, a gentle woman named Rosa, greeted me like an old friend. My hands fumbled with the clay, but laughter came easily among strangers. We shared stories, some joyful, some quietly painful. I met a woman named Janet, who was learning to rebuild her life after divorce, a retired nurse exploring new hobbies, a young father searching for calm after loss. Each of us in our way was trying to grow something new from old heartbreak. What surprised me most was how natural it felt to talk about myself, not as a mother, but as Helen, a woman with dreams, disappointments, and quiet hopes of her own. I told them about my love for jazz music, about learning to bake bread from scratch, about memories of Seattle's rainy springs. In listening to others and letting myself be heard, I started to reclaim pieces of who I was before my life revolved around meeting everyone else's needs. It was uncomfortable at first, but gradually a gentle pride began to take root. Here's the lesson these weeks have taught me: self-worth is not selfishness. It's the soil from which healthy relationships grow. When you start treating yourself with kindness and curiosity, you teach others to do the same. I wish I had learned this sooner. By focusing only on giving, I'd made myself invisible not only to my daughters, but to myself. There's bravery in turning inward and asking, what brings me joy? What do I want? And sometimes the answers can be unexpectedly beautiful. With each passing class, my hands grew steadier, the clay more responsive, and my smile a little less tentative. I realized healing is not about forgetting the past, but about making room for a different future, one where I am more than the sum of what I give. As I left class one evening, I felt something new blooming inside hope, fragile and persistent. I carried it home with me, quietly excited for whatever the next day might bring. Sometimes the support we need comes from places we never expected. On a breezy Saturday morning, I stopped by the farmer's market for fresh bread. As I browsed the stands, I heard my name called. It was Linda, a neighbor I'd only ever exchanged pleasantries with. She asked if I wanted to join her and a few friends for coffee. I hesitated. Old habits made me wary of new connections, but I agreed. We sat under a striped awning, sharing pastries and laughter. The women talked about their lives, caring for grandchildren, trying new recipes, rediscovering passions. No one asked about family drama. For once, I was just Helen. As I listened, I realized that these small invitations to coffee, to join a book club, to walk in the park, were tiny lifelines. Linda mentioned she'd lost her own mother young and always looked for ways to create new circles of support. Another friend, Nora, confessed she'd been adopted by her neighbor's family after her divorce, finding comfort in their traditions and kindness. Their stories warmed me. I saw that the world is full of people ready to welcome us, to make room at their tables if we're brave enough to say yes. This was a lesson I never expected to learn so late in life. Sometimes the family we need isn't the one we were born with, but the one we choose along the way. In American culture, there's a quiet understanding of chosen family, friends, and neighbors who step in when relatives cannot or will not. I thought about the years I spent focusing solely on my daughters, not realizing how much richness I'd missed by not opening my heart to new friendships, new traditions, new ways of belonging. The gift of these unexpected allies is that they help you see yourself through gentler eyes. They remind you that you're not defined by what you've lost, but by what you continue to grow. Sitting at that market table, sipping strong coffee, and listening to Linda joke about her failed carrot cake, I felt something inside me soften. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't alone. I was part of something, maybe small, maybe imperfect, but real and welcoming all the same. That afternoon, as I returned home with a loaf of bread and the promise to attend a neighborhood potluck, I realized how much had changed. The ache of being left out was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was slowly being replaced by gratitude for these new connections. With each step outside my comfort zone, I was piecing together a new kind of family, one built on kindness, laughter, and the courage to let others in. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I knew I was ready for whatever the next chapter might hold. The day of Laura's wedding arrived on a quiet note. I woke to a pale gray sky and the steady patter of rain against my window. There was no invitation in my inbox, no last-minute phone call. I made myself a simple breakfast and let the silence fill the house. It stung, knowing I wouldn't be there to see my daughter's vows, but I also noticed a strange calm. In years past, I would have let the ache unravel me. This time, I let it come and go, breathing through it, reminding myself that letting go was not the same as giving up on love. I decided to spend the day caring for myself. I put on my rain boots and took a long walk by the water, the air fresh and cool on my cheeks. At the park, I passed a mother and her teenage son laughing over spilled coffee, their closeness both tender and bittersweet. I smiled, grateful for memories of Laura's childhood, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories, the late-night talks. Those moments were real, untouched by the disappointments that followed. I realized that nothing could take those years from me, not even a locked wedding door. As the afternoon faded, I met up with Linda and her friends for the promised potluck. There was warmth in their welcome laughter over mismatched plates, and a gentle acceptance that needed no explanation. For the first time, I didn't feel compelled to justify my story or my pain. I simply showed up as myself. Nora brought a homemade peach pie and offered a quiet toast to new beginnings. I felt included in a way that had nothing to do with obligation, just the kindness of people choosing to see and celebrate one another. The lesson I carried from that day was this: letting go can be its own act of love. In stepping back, I made room for both Laura and myself to grow, even if that growth was painful. We can't force others to meet us where we are, nor can we always heal what's been hurt. But we can choose to honor our own hearts, to seek out the connections that nourish us, and to trust that peace can come even when the story doesn't end as we'd hoped. As evening fell and I walked home beneath a canopy of glowing streetlights, I felt a quiet pride in how far I'd come. There was sadness, yes, but also hope. I was learning day by day that my value wasn't tied to anyone's approval, not even my daughter's. There was freedom in that truth, a gentle anticipation for what life might offer next. With each new step, I was no longer waiting to be chosen. I was choosing myself, and that I realized was the beginning of a different kind of joy. Looking back, I see how far I've traveled from the moment that email arrived to this quiet evening, sitting by my kitchen window, with a cup of tea and hope blooming in my chest. This journey was never about being uninvited to a wedding. It was about rediscovering who I am outside of the roles I've played for so long. Each chapter, the sacrifices of motherhood, the painful realization of becoming invisible, the courage to draw boundaries, the aching process of letting go, was a step toward reclaiming my own story. Healing, I've learned, is a gentle unfolding, a daily act of self-respect and forgiveness. The lessons from this season of my life are simple but hard-won. We are allowed to want more than gratitude. We are allowed to expect kindness, respect, and reciprocity from the people we love, even if they're family. True connection isn't about losing yourself to keep others happy. It's about meeting in the middle, about being seen and heard, about honoring your own needs without apology. I wish I'd learned these things sooner, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to begin again, no matter my age or circumstance. Finding new allies was a blessing I never expected. From the pottery class to Linda's table, I discovered that life still holds room for belonging, for new friendships, and shared laughter. The comfort of chosen family, those who invite you in simply because they care, reminded me that the world is full of possibility if we dare to step outside our old definitions of home. Each step outside my comfort zone has planted seeds of courage, slowly blooming into a life that feels more honest and full. Letting go of Laura, at least for now, was never easy, but it was an act of love, both for her and for myself. I realized that we cannot control the choices of others, only the integrity of our own hearts. By choosing myself, I found peace that wasn't dependent on someone else's invitation. I found hope in the ordinary moments, joy in unexpected friendships, and the steady truth that I am enough. My story isn't finished. It's just beginning a new chapter, one written with gentleness, dignity, and the quiet strength of choosing my own worth. If any part of this journey spoke to you, I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me your story or the lesson you're learning. If you found comfort or courage here, please like, subscribe, and join this growing community. Together, we can remind one another that it's never too late to reclaim your place at the table, and that sometimes the strongest love is the one you finally give to yourself.